to complete works fast and lasts.
The person that shot and killed my son is walking the streets today, and this law does not work.
Sabrina Fulton, the mother of Trayvon Martin, testifying earlier today on Capitol Hill about so-called stand your ground laws. These laws, which are now on the books in no less than 22 states, have made it much easier for people to claim self-defense when they fire their weapons. But do they make it too easy? That's the question right now. And joining us now is Lucy McBath, who also testified before the Senate today about the loss of her son Jordan, who was killed by a man that later claimed he was justified under Florida's Stand Your Ground law. And also with us is Representative Marcia Fudge, Democrat of Ohio. Thank you both for joining us. If I might begin with you, Ms. McBath, we'd like to express, obviously, our condolences for your son's loss and also our gratitude that you are speaking out so courageously on this deeply troubling issue. And I'd like our audience to take a listen to some of your testimony earlier today.
But you can never really know my boy, because an angry man who owned a gun kept it close at hand and chose to demonstrate unbridled hatred one balmy evening for reasons I will never understand. These laws empowered his prejudiced beliefs and subsequent rage over my son's own life.
The end of your son's life began as an argument about playing loud music inside a car, is that right?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, the boys had come from a day at shopping at the mall. It was the day after Thanksgiving, Black Friday in Jacksonville, Florida. And they had simply stopped at a gas station, a convenience store, to get cigarettes, candy, things of that nature as they were on their way to Jordan's father's house, and they were going to play video games. And in the time that they were sitting there, Michael Dunn comes beside them, drives beside them, and tells them to turn the music down, the so-called thug music, he calls it. And the children turned the music down. Then Jordan asked that the music be turned back up because in Jordan's mind, you know, they're not doing anything wrong, they're just playing their music.
And it's inside their car.
Inside their car.
And what happens next?
Well, Michael Dunn was agitated and angry that they weren't turning the music down, and he decided that, you know, they needed to pay attention and do as he instructed them to do. And an argument ensued between Michael Dunn and my son, and Michael Dunn simply says, "You can't talk to me that way." He pulls his 9mm gun out of his glove box, and he shot 10 rounds into the car, and 3 of those bullets killed my son instantly.
And I should say that nobody in the car that your son was traveling in was armed. Is that right?
Absolutely. There were no guns, no alcohol, nothing of the nature that could be intimidating or threatening to anyone.
Congresswoman, since firearms are so ubiquitous in this country, do laws like Stand Your Ground make sense if they actually encourage people to use their guns whenever they feel, quotes, threatened?
Absolutely not, Martin. I find it most interesting that the same people that consistently talk about people being accountable, taking responsibility for themselves, have now decided that there should be no standard of responsibility, no standard of accountability if you are in a place where they think that you can legally be and just decide that someone is threatening you in some way. I mean, Martin, think about it. We teach police officers, those who are trained with weapons, to only use that force which is necessary. But we are now absolving everyday citizens of the same standard of responsibility and accountability. We have decided that any level of violence is okay, that everyone should be able to have a gun and defend themselves. What happened to humanity, number one? Number two, what has happened to the people who have all these years talked about responsibility and now there is none? Something is very wrong in America, Martin, when we allow people to carry guns, when we know, in fact, that the more guns that are on the streets, the higher the incidence of homicide is. But yet they would deny the data, they would ignore the data and say, you know what, everything's going to be okay as long as everyone has a gun. We have to stop buying into that foolishness.
Absolutely, we have to. Miss McBath, the man charged in your son's death has written some letters that made it out to the public. In one of them, he expresses his hope that the trial will move to counties that are, quote, predominantly white and Republican and supporters of gun rights. I have to ask you, how much hope do you hold that justice will be served in the case of your son's death?
Well, we have to believe that justice will be served. The justice system that we have here in this country is the best that we have. The two cases are very different. They're very similar but very different. The letters that Michael Dunn wrote are very painful. They're very hard to read. It's very hard to understand that how he could have such disheartening feelings and opinions and ideas about people that are not like him. If we are posed with the trial being moved, if any of those things should happen, then we will have to deal with that at that time. Whatever comes out of the letters, whatever happens because of Michael Dunn's letters, that will be of his own doing. We are not insinuating anything that's going to be racially biased. We have decided that we are not going to buy into any of that, that we're not going to incite the country to racism, that what Jordan's father and I are doing is for all children. It's for everyone. And we are not going to let his opinions and ideas about race, about our son, or about what he's done determine the course of our future.
Thank you so much for your grace, your courage and your dignity.
Thank you.
Congresswoman, the hearing was originally scheduled, as you know, to take place on September the 17th, one day after the Navy Yard shooting. But I have to ask you this question. Were you surprised that only about 4 senators actually decided to attend today?
I'm not surprised at all. I listened to a woman who lost her son, and I tell you, Martin, it would be laughable, if not so serious, that someone who talks about wanting to get a fair trial would believe the only way to do that is to have an all-white jury, where in fact at today's hearing, they talked about the fact that stand your ground laws benefit African Americans. It is the height of hypocrisy for people to use race in an environment that is already charged because of the death of an innocent young man, to use race to say, you know what, something's wrong with them. I don't want to see another trial where the person who was killed is on trial and not the person who did the killing.
Absolutely. Representative Marcia Fudge and Lucy McBath, thank you both. And Ms. McBath, thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
And we'll be right back in a moment.